Welcome to Inside Scoop Live, the podcast where indie authors get personal, sharing insights about their books, their writing journeys, and their passions. I'm your host, Sherry Hoyt, and I invite you to join me for engaging conversations with both debut indie authors and seasoned veterans. Whether you're looking for your next great read or a bit of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. George St. George is here today to talk about his award-winning novel, Eye-Opening. It's a psychological thriller uncovering ancient rituals and secret societies hidden beneath a Christian college on the island of Eye. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the author. George St. George is a contemporary author known for exploring the intersections of identity, society, and the human psyche in his work. His passion is to challenge readers to think critically about the world around them. Learn more and connect with George St. George at georgestgeorge.com. Well, hi, George. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Good morning.
Nice to have you. So before we go any further, listeners, congratulations are in order. George St. George won the grand prize in fiction in our 2024 Reader Views Literary Awards. So congratulations again, George. And tell us what your reaction was when you found out that Eye-Opening took the top spot.
Well, Sherry, honestly, I was stunned. I didn't believe it. It didn't sink in, and it still hasn't, even though I'm here talking to you and the check was mailed. It's still kind of funny trying to wrap my head around it.
Yeah. Now, was this your debut novel?
Yes, ma'am.
Ooh, won the big prize with your debut novel. That's fabulous. Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about the book. What is Eye-Opening about, and what was your inspiration behind the story?
Well, I'll talk about the inspiration first. It's easier to do that than to talk about the book. About 2017, I encountered a memoir by a lady named Kathy O'Brien, and the title of the book is Transformation of America. And she made some amazing claims that were stunning to me. And part of it was the unbelievable things she went through in her childhood. And I decided that, no, these claims can't be real. So I started doing research. And the more research that I did, the more sources I found in scientific literature, in other people's memoirs, absolutely backing up what she had to say. And the main takeaway that I took from her book was that a lot of children, when they encounter severe trauma in their lives, whether it be physical or emotional, psychological, or even sexual, that they dissociate. And that's a gift that they are given so that they're able to survive what's going on and still lead a somewhat normal life in other ways.
Right.
And then another great influence in this, as I was doing my research, is a podcast by a woman named Emma Catherine, and it's called the Imagination Podcast. And twice a week, she interviews survivors of these things and just does an amazing job of listening and getting them a platform to talk about the things that they've always been uncomfortable to talk to anybody about. And so it's about awareness of children who have gone through these things and that they're in your life. And so that was the inspiration, were those two women, one who was a survivor and one who was not. But they're making people aware of some of the things that are going on in our world.
Yeah. So what is Eye-Opening about, the story?
It's about 6 college students, 5 of them in their senior year and 1 in their junior. They're at a small Christian college on an island in the middle of nowhere called the Island of Eye, which is where the book title comes from. It's the island name. And their school and the island is controlled by an underground cabal that their main source of power and income is trafficking children.
Wow. That's some heavy stuff right there, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
What I think readers can appreciate is how you've tackled such difficult topics through a fictional lens. It's really a powerful way to raise awareness about real-world issues, but in a more approachable way. I mean, it doesn't really make the subject matter any easier, but it does kind of create a space for reflection and understanding. So, introduce us to a couple of your characters. Tell us about Walt Walls. He's your main character. He's kind and curious and starts off with a fairly innocent view of the world. What drew you to him as your central figure?
Well, my story is very emotionally charged because of the subject matter, and I needed someone that was calm, composed, sensitive, and feeling. So that was the goal in his character arc, was the depth of his character and his stability. I modeled him somewhat after my father, who did that for not only me but my brothers and sisters.
Mm,
And so that was why I chose him. And plus, he's an English guy. He's an English major. And so he looks at words, and I love looking at words. And you'll see that when you read my book.
absolutely, yeah. So, tell us about Natcha. She's an especially intriguing character. She's brilliant, she's ambiguous, and sometimes unsettling. Who is she in your mind?
Nacha is a compilation of many, many people whose memoirs I have read or whose testimonies I've heard online on Emma's podcast mainly. And some children, when they dissociate, some of their alternate personalities or of the multiple personalities are absolutely brilliant. They can be trained to memorize every detail, to have a photographic and oral, as in listening, perfect recall of everything that they've heard, memorize long strings of arcane facts. And in the wealthiest families, of course, they get very, very good education as well. And so that is who she is. She's grown up as a member of the cabal, not knowing it in her presentation that she presents at school,
Mm,
but she has this brilliance. She was educated in Europe in the finest universities, and she has insight and wisdom that she shares throughout the book.
okay. Now, Walt's connection with Nacha and the others in his circle, his orbit, grounds the story emotionally. How do those relationships evolve as the truth of I begins to unravel?
Well, the island has a mountain is the central feature, and the mountain has a crack in it due to an earthquake. And that crack in the mountain serves as a metaphor because it allows the magnetic fields of the islands to change somewhat, which allows people to remember their pasts because they hadn't been able to remember them before. And
Mm,
so, as the characters remember their pasts, interesting things happen because many of the characters in the story have multiple personalities and they remember the trauma that they went through to earn those dissociative identities. And so that's the metaphor of the mountain, and the earthquake and the crack. It's a metaphor for what happens with people with dissociative identities. They begin to remember, sometimes in their 50s, sometimes in their 60s, sometimes in their 20s. It just depends upon when they get into a safe and loving place in their life that they'd never experienced before, and that allows the memories to come back.
oh, okay. They have to be in a comfortable position in order to even have those things surface. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, wow. I feel like there's so much going on in this story. Let's talk about the actual writing of the story for a bit. This is a remarkably layered debut. It's rich in philosophy and theology and psychological tension. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in bringing the story to life?
When you look in the darkness as much as I had to in my research, it can get pretty dark inside. It can be depressing. I was alone. My wife was at school teaching, which she does every day. That was a real difficulty. Was just the emotional pain of reading these stories of people that had hurt incredibly. And if you have any sense of empathy, you begin to feel that.
Yeah.
That was hard. Another big challenge was figuring out what to do with the developmental edits that came back. They were wonderful, but I had the story in my mind and I had to relook a few things, and that was difficult because this is my debut novel.
Right.
I'm learning on the job. And of course, there was loneliness because when you're an author, you're lonely. And if I'm speaking to authors, It's just a lonely thing. And the one thing I'm real thankful for was my Timothy, my one reader that I would send a chapter at a time and get his input back. And that was a huge and amazing thing. I actually wrote it with him in mind as being the reader, kind
Oh,
of like
wow.
Tolkien did for his son Christopher.
Oh,
He
wow.
wrote for one person.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you know this person or did you find him on how did this relationship come about?
Maybe he was my roommate in college many decades ago.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I was wondering about you mentioned the darkness. You cover some tough subjects and it can be depressing. And you mentioned that. And how long did it take you to write the story, put it all together because of the challenges of the topics you were writing about?
The research started in 2017. The novel form of this book, I started that in February of 2023, and the manuscript was done by October.
Oh, wow.
It just kind of flowed
Yeah.
out of the
Yeah.
research.
Once you got going. Yeah. Yeah. So, did you always envision Eye Opening as such an in depth kind of story, or did things kind of come out in the writing and with the developmental edits and the rewriting as you went along? Or is it pretty much the story you had imagined from the start?
It was a story I imagined from the start. And the reason it's complex is because life is complex. But I don't have a TV, so I don't get 30-minute solutions to problems that are earth shattering. They evolve over time. And so that comes through in my book. Everybody's life is complex.
Yeah.
And so it just reflects real life. And that was how it was written. I'm a pantser. I had a very broad outline, which was a semester, a second semester. I knew the presentations that I wanted to do at the end. That made me need 6 students. And I figured out the students and what they were going to be about and why they would want to deal with the topics that they're dealing with.
Mm.
And then started with chapter 1, and the characters led the way.
Yeah. Yeah. As they do. I love how that happens. I don't know how it happens, but it does. And that's another thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about the darkness. Is like you have to get into the lives of those characters, which weren't always, butterflies and rainbows. So
Hmm.
the story blends campus life with something far more sinister happening underground. How did you build that layered dual reality structure?
Well, I pulled back my memories from college. I was on the 2-decade program. I started in yeah, it took me 20 years to cram 4 into it. But I do remember my college experiences. And so I could draw on that. And indeed, I went to the fairly small college here in town and wrote a good portion of it in their library just to remember those feelings and to have that atmosphere there.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and that was the normalcy. That's normal life. You go to school, you got homework, you got relationships with your friends, you talk in the cafeteria, those kinds of things. Then I would intersperse the things that were happening underground because literally that is where they happen most of the time is underground. And
Hmm.
so it was just a natural blending of the two worlds when they came into conflict. And that was one of the things that the developmental editor said was I needed to put the inciting incident much closer to the beginning of the book. And so it took me a while to figure out how to do that. Put it in chapter 3, I believe.
Yeah, it's all a learning process. The island of I becomes a living, breathing part of the story, almost like a character in and of itself. Why set your narrative in this particular place?
The first reason was because of these difficult topics that we're talking about. I wanted to put psychological distance. So it's an imaginary island somewhere. So you can go there as you're reading and you can have that suspension of disbelief. You
Mm,
can it's a safety measure actually to be able to look at things from afar. That was number 1. Number 2, the island of I has 3 different meanings. One is AI, artificial intelligence, allusions to that. It doesn't talk about the technological idea of artificial intelligence, but the reader may, after thinking about it a few years, may say, oh, maybe there is an artificial intelligence that the book is referencing.
Mm.
The other thing is that there was a battle in the Bible, a city named Ai, that was a defeat for the Israelites. They went to battle in Jericho and won, and then they went up against these people in the town of Ai and they lost. And so that's also another part of it. The other thing is it's eye opening, your physical eyes opening, or your heart, your eye, your ego opening up to the plight of children who have gone through these things.
Yeah, yeah,
And they're all around us.
yeah. I imagine that was part of the challenge, probably more during the research part, realizing all of these things that are actually going on in the world. Just kind of,
And when four different people, as you are writing it, come into your life to tell you their stories, whereas none had done that before in my life, it is an amazing thing. And it's because I changed and they sensed that they were able to talk freely about things that nobody wants to hear.
yeah, yeah. So, did you have like live interviews? How did you establish this level of trust? Because that's what it takes.
Just random people that came into my life.
Wow.
I don't know how it happened. I guess it was more of a spiritual connection than anything.
Right, right. Well, like you said, they obviously felt safe with you to tell their stories because you wouldn't get very far without that for sure. Yeah. Now, Eye Opening is a psychological thriller at its core, but it has a very slow burning dread kind of throughout. Was that atmosphere something that you had to build carefully, or did it come naturally as you were telling the story?
But it just came natural. It was, like I said, I started with chapter one, it had no outline, and so it just happened.
Yeah. And you said you love words, and words are very important 'cause the words that you use can give that sense of dread. You know, you're not reading a lighthearted, let's go to grandma's house kind of story. So it's all about the writing style and the words you use. Let's talk about some of the big themes in the book. You explore hidden power structures, secret societies, and generational trauma. Why did you feel these themes were important to explore right now?
A lot of people are becoming more aware of these things. Hidden power structures and the generational trauma that was addressed by the movie Sound of Freedom. And that really resonated with millions and millions of people around the world who realize that, yes, these things are going on, and no, I don't like them, but I don't know what to do about them.
Hmm.
And this book is a response to that of what to do about it. It's not a call to arms to defeat the evil, but it is a call to us to wake up and provide that safety and that love that a wounded child needs, and that the wounded child may be walking around in a 70-year-old body. That has happened to me, where
Hmm.
a 70-year-old woman started talking about things that had happened in her childhood because she felt safe, and almost a complete stranger. It was an amazing healing time for her and obviously for the other people that were around. It was a beautiful thing for her to be able to share and to be safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most chilling ideas in the book is that evil doesn't always look like evil and it hides in plain sight, and I think we're kind of seeing that in the world today. Was that a message that you consciously built into the narrative?
Absolutely. We're authors, and we say this: never judge a book by its cover. Correct? Same thing with people. The ones that look the most amazing sometimes and the most put together may have a different life at night that we have no clue about. And so um, that was absolutely something that was in my mind, was that people we would never suspect may be harboring secrets that are just beyond our imagination.
Yeah. And it's especially deceiving for children who tend to trust people that they look like, they act like, they talk like someone you can trust. And then you find
Exactly.
out that's wrong. I mean, I think children are obviously more susceptible to things like that, but we all are.
Exactly.
Yeah. Some scenes are emotionally heavy and disturbing. How did you approach writing about the trauma without overwhelming the reader?
That came through practice, actually. I had written a nonfiction book just a few months prior where I took 5 memoirs and did a comparison contrast of those. And
Oh,
when I did that, I just wrote down exactly what they said about their traumatic experiences. And it was an amazing book, and nobody could read it. I mean,
oh no.
it was so dark. In fact, I referenced that book in the novel. It was called Oh No. And so I thought, well, how can I write this for people that have experienced it without it being so triggering? So I rewrote the authors' accounts of their experiences as if it was a group of children who had just been rescued from that type of situation, and a childlike explanation of what happened to
Mm,
them, and that they're now safe and that they can continue with their lives in a much better way. And so that practice actually came through in my writing. The developmental editor that I was speaking about before, Lucy, she said that when I was writing about those difficult scenes, it seemed that I entered a flow state. And it probably came from that practice of writing it for children. I wanted it to not be graphic or gory or sensational or evoke things in people that
yeah,
I'll just leave it there.
yeah, yeah. Wow, that's amazing. She picked up on that from your writing. That's a good editor. Let's talk a little bit about theology and interpretation. There's a deep engagement with biblical texts throughout, particularly the King James Bible. Why did you use that as the foundation for the mystery?
Well, number one is the Bible is by far the most best selling book of all time.
Mm-hmm.
5 billion copies or so. There's nothing that is even close. So, whether you read it or not, or aware of it or not, it has an impact on our society that is just, it's just there. It's literature that is there. Stories. Everybody knows who the Good Samaritan and what a Good Samaritan is, and they may have never read that in the Bible.
Right.
There's a fiction portraying a truth. And that's what I believe one of the greatest fictions ever told, because Jesus was making up that story. It's a fictional thing that he was talking about, but that fiction that he told, that story that he made of this man who helped others, lives in our society. There's a Good Sam Club for RVers because they help each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's pervasive in our society. So there's that aspect. And then I also, in my research, found out that secret societies use the King James Bible in their ceremonies.
Mm.
Oh, and then so you start researching that, and then you find the things that I wrote about in the book, and then you find things that no other researcher has that you put in the book because you found it, and you want to let people know that it's there. There's a lot hidden in that first edition of the 1611 King James Bible, and yes, there's more to come.
Okay, okay. Now, as Walt and others begin kind of revisiting long accepted scripture, it opens the door to some uncomfortable realizations. Was that something you hope to prompt in readers?
Absolutely. We've been told what the Bible says, and sometimes that is not what it says. Once you read it, you go, huh, no, that isn't what you told me.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
words say something different. And it was realizations like that, and they were very difficult for me because I grew up as a student of the book. And with hearing people tell me that this is what it says and this is what it means. And then as I especially when I looked into this world, I realized, oh my goodness, there's some things in here that really need to take a second look. One of those is the story of Joseph, being set free from slavery in Egypt. But the part that this book looks at is the fact that when he feeds the world, he enslaves the farmers and all the
Mm,
people of Egypt. And that is something that I had never noticed, but it's right there that he bought all the people and their land for Pharaoh. And then said, by the way, you got to pay 20% in taxes of the land you don't own, nor do you own yourselves. So, anyhow, these are very uncomfortable things that are in some of the stories in the Bible that are just kind of glossed over.
Yeah, wow, wow. You walk a delicate line also. It isn't an anti faith story, but it definitely challenges tradition. How do you hope your religious readers respond?
That they would find compassion in their hearts and choose to live it instead of living a story that might be in a book, to write their own story, to be the love that is inside.
Okay. Have you had any responses from Christian readers?
Well, yes. The first one would be my Timothy, and that's the person who read my book. And he's a school teacher, and he said that because of this, he now listens to children, especially the ones that are having behavioral issues, because he realizes that there's probably something behind it. And so, as he has listened, that has opened up the door for a lot of those children to find peace and restored relationships with their friends or their teachers or even their parents. So it does make a difference in that we can look at life in a totally different sense. Oh, if you're hurting, I can listen to you. What do you
Yeah.
need for me to listen to you today for? It's just simple things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's how it starts. The book leaves readers with more questions than answers, but in a good way. What do you hope lingers with readers after they turn that final page?
That there is something that they can do with this overwhelming problem that this world has. And that is the simple thing of provide safety and true love for a person that comes into your world when they come into your world for the time that you share together.
Mm,
It's that simple. And those encounters may be for 10 or 15 minutes. But if you provide that safety for them and they know that they're loved, that can have an immense impact on their future because that starts the healing process. And that's the bottom line of this story is we can do something.
yeah.
Provide safety and love for the people that come into our world. Very simple.
Very simple, easy to execute.
And it doesn't cost anything. That's the cool part.
Right, right. So, what's next for you? Will there be a sequel to Eye Opening, or are you working on something entirely different?
Oh, the sequel is definitely in the works. I'm about a third of the way through. And it looks at the students as they encounter their now changing world. And there's more things that I found in my research that I couldn't cram into a 620-page book. So I have to write another one.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Now, Eye Opening, you sell it currently from your website, and then it officially releases to the world in other platforms in May. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, give us your website information and how readers can learn more.
Okay. The website is www.george.st.george, which is my author name. And the final George is with an S. So it's georgestgeorges.com.
Okay. All right. Well, George, is there anything else you wanted to add today for our listeners?
No, thank you for your time is the most important thing. Thank you for listening and for your interest in my book. It is fascinating. There's a lot of surprises in it, which I won't spoil. And thank you, Sherry, for not asking me about those. And I hope you enjoy it.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, George, for being on the show and sharing a little bit about you and your work. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today for my interview with George St. George, author of Eye Opening. You can learn more about George and his work at georgestgeorge.com. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.